You might start the day with a clear plan to work on a major project, but by the end of the day, you find you've spent all your time responding to emails, messages, and urgent requests, while that main project hasn't moved an inch. And this creates a very real gap between activity and progress. The calendar might be packed, and the to-do list might have items checked off, but all of that motion doesn't necessarily add up to meaningful movement on the most important goals. If you think about it, in any work environment today, there's just a constant stream of incoming information. We're talking emails, data, messages, and new tasks coming at you from all sides. And that stream is, for all practical purposes, unlimited. There is always going to be another email to read, another notification to check, another piece of data to look over. The one resource that's required to actually process all of this, though, is our own individual attention. And unlike the information it's dealing with, our attention is a strictly finite resource. You only have so much of it you can give out during the day. This imbalance creates a fundamental problem of scarcity. An overabundance of information automatically leads to a deficit of attention, which forces us to constantly choose what to focus on. So the core challenge for any organization or system is figuring out how to manage this. It needs a way to direct that scarce resource, attention, toward a field of information that is essentially infinite. Well, since attention itself is an internal state, you can't directly see it or measure it, the system has to rely on proxies or stand-ins to track where it's being spent. The most dependable proxy turns out to be visible activity. Sending an email, checking off a task, showing up to a meeting. These are all signals that can be easily observed. This sets up a very clear incentive. Work that can be seen is work that can be tracked. What happens then is that tasks that are easy to see and quantify start to become valuable to the system. Their importance isn't necessarily defined by how much they contribute to the big picture, but by their ability to prove that attention was allocated. This pressure to always show that you're active creates a continuous demand for quick responses and frequent updates. The whole environment starts to favor a high volume of small, separate tasks that can be finished and reported quickly, which constantly feeds the system new proof of engagement. But what happens when this demand for visible activity creates more signals than any one person can handle? Well, this state of overload has some very direct effects on our ability to make decisions. For one, with a constant flood of new information, it just becomes harder to weigh different options. The process of thinking through one choice is often cut short by the arrival of a new, competing demand for your attention. So when you're faced with too many inputs, decision-making tends to become reactive. The option that's the most recent, the easiest to solve, or just the one that feels the most urgent often gets picked over an option that might be better but requires more thought. This kind of environment also encourages putting off complex, high-effort decisions. Why? Because tackling the simpler, more immediate demands gives a faster and more visible return on that investment of attention, and that's exactly the kind of outcome the system is built to recognize and reward. This dynamic creates a built-in bias that favors urgent work over important work. Urgent tasks are naturally reactive, they're highly visible, and they demand a response right now. Important work, on the other hand, is usually proactive. Its progress is harder to see day to day, and it requires sustained focus, a state that the system's constant stream of interruptions works against. So this feeling of constant urgency isn't really a sign that the system is broken. In fact, it's the logical outcome of how it's designed. The system is actually working exactly as intended. It's efficiently directing its most scarce resource, attention, to the things that are most visible and therefore the easiest to measure. The system is optimized for visible activity. This creates a permanent trade-off between being immediately responsive and making steady, often less visible, progress toward long-term goals.